Welcome everybody. We'll start with a light offering. This is for the father of a friend of Manikam, Balasubramaniam, who passed away very recently in India. And so we make this offering of light with the thought that the merit of this offering is the cause that Balasubramaniam has a very peaceful, easy experience in the intermediate state, very quickly as a high rebirth, progresses on all of the stages of the path to enlightenment, very quickly attains enlightenment, Buddhahood for the benefit of all. And also that his time, at this time, that all of his family has peace and comfort. Okay. Since we're at the half mark of the year, I thought it would be a good idea, as we go through the preliminary prayers, just to say a little bit about them. It's quite important to have a productive attitude and understanding of the preliminary prayers that we do. So if we simply regard them as ritual and as if they're merely something that we have to get through until we get to the actual class, the actual meditation, then that's not so useful. The state of mind that actually makes them part of our practice is really to reflect on the meaning. So one way we can think about the prayers is that they help us transit between the busy, agitated state of mind that we have before we begin to practice, when we're taken up with whatever is happening in our life, what we're thinking about doing tomorrow, what's happening at work, what's happening with our family, and so forth, and creating a gateway into the more settled and positive state of mind that's most useful for us to practice Lam Rim. And so to do that, it's really important that we're mindful of the meaning of the prayers, and that as much as possible that we reflect on that as we go through them. Why do we recite some of the prayers in Tibetan? Geshe Loden would often say that that's part of our tradition as the Tibetan Buddhist Society, and so to keep that lineage going, therefore, we also recite some of them in Tibetan. So the first of the prayers is that we traditionally do at the beginning of this class is the prayer of praise to Guru Shakyamuni Buddha, which is on page 19 of the prayer book. And again, if we reflect on the meaning of this prayer, among other things, we're remembering the kindness of Guru Shakyamuni Buddha. So Guru Shakyamuni Buddha is the founder of this lineage of teachings, to the extent that we derive any benefit from learning how to meditate, and the teachings on impermanence, and the teachings on love and compassion. To whatever measure they give us guidance or benefit in our own life, it's only because Guru Shakyamuni Buddha 2,600 years ago practiced and taught these teachings ourselves. Also, this prayer reminds us of what we ourselves are aspiring to. So, as the prayer itself says, in enumerating his qualities, Guru Shakyamuni Buddha, absolutely extraordinary, inconceivable qualities, and yet this is the state through this practice that we're aiming to realise ourselves. So in reflecting on the qualities that are enumerated in a prayer, it becomes more meaningful and inspiring if we're able to contemplate that these are the things that we're looking to realise within our own continuum. So if we can bring that sort of state of mind to it, that's very useful. Of course, in the space of 50 seconds or whatever that it takes us to recite the prayer, it may be difficult to generate that state of mind. So one of the things that's really useful is actually in our own time to reflect on the meaning of the prayers and to meditate on the prayers. So the prayers themselves are a perfect basis for meditation. And if we familiarise ourselves with them that way, then we come to recite them. It's easier to generate that state of mind, and so for the experience to be meaningful, and not so much blah, blah, blah. So within this prayer, there are a few Sanskrit words, and as with any of the prayers, if anybody has any questions about them, then please ask me or any of the older students about what they mean or what they're getting at. So, for example, there is the term in this prayer Bhagavan, which is a Sanskrit term which means victor or conqueror of the delusions and obscurations. There's Tathagata, which means he who has thus gone, that is, gone beyond psychic existence. Arhat, which means foe destroyer, in particular destroyer of the foes of ignorance and the other delusions. And the expression Sugata, which means he who has gone to bliss. So again, it's useful if we really understand what it is the prayer is saying and reflect on that, and that way we extract the most meaning and value out of it. So we'll recite the prayer of praise to Shakyamuni Buddha in Tibetan and English. Champa chandende jinchepa drachampa yangdapa drachampa nare sanje ripadang shapsu tempa dewa shepa jiten tempa chebu dewe kalo jua lana me pa ladang minam chitampa Sanje chandende peljawa shakya dupala shasalu jodo chaso chiho. Teacher, Bhagawan, Tathagata, Arhat, perfectly pure and complete Buddha, all-knowing, having poise, Sugata, apprehender of the world, navigator of beings to be subdued, incomparable, teacher of gods and humans, to the Buddha, the Bhagawan, the glorious conqueror Shakyamuni, we prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. And next is the refuge in bodhichitta prayer, and again, to extract the most meaning and value from this practice, it enables us to remember our motivation for the practice of the Buddha Dharma, which can be the motivation of any of the three scopes. So as we recite this prayer, we can remember our aim, which in the case of Mahayana practice is the objective of achieving enlightenment in order for the benefit of all living beings. We remember Buddha, who is the teacher of that path. We remember the Dharma, which is the actual method of realising that path. And we reflect on the Sangha, who are like the assistance or support for that path. And we reflect that in practicing this way, with the support of Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, we do that so that this very practice is a cause that we attain enlightenment in order for the benefit of all. In this practice, in this prayer where it refers to the merit of my generosity and so on, that refers particularly to the Mahayana practice of the six perfections, of which the first is generosity. So, and so on refers to the practices of patience, ethics, energetic perseverance, and so forth. Sangye chodang sochi chok nam la jang choba du danye cha sochi tai ge jen so je pe so nam ji do la pen shi sang ye dro pa sho. To the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha I go for refuge until becoming enlightened. Through the merit of my generosity and so on, may I achieve Buddhahood to benefit all beings. To the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, I go for refuge until becoming enlightened. Through the merit of my generosity and so on, may I achieve Buddhahood to benefit all beings. Then the next prayer is the short mandala offering, and we do this prayer primarily in order to generate merit. In order to succeed in every aspect of our practice, we need to generate merit. And one of the easiest and most fundamental ways of generating merit is generosity. So in this case, with this prayer, it's the mental generosity of visualizing the entire universe transformed into a beautiful jewel-like offering that's offered to all the enlightened beings through the 10 directions, and also uniting that with the thought of bodhichitta, that not only is this world perfected, purified, transformed into an object of utmost beauty, not only is it a perfect offering to all the Buddhas, but also that it's a perfect realm to be the abode of every one of our fellow living beings. So it's a really, really beautiful thought and prayer if we become familiar with it, reflect on it in that way. With any of these prayers, even if for a moment this sparks in us a thought of surpassing generosity, well, that's very different from the type of attitude that we bring to most of activity. So it's very, very valuable to have that mindfulness towards this practice to generate the positive mind for our practice of Lam Rim. Saji Pochi Jojin Me To Tram Leng Jin Yere Jambare Sangye Jendo Mente Oji Drokan Anda Jenla Chupashu. This ground, anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, Mount Meru, the 4 continents, adorned with sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered thus, may all beings enjoy such pure lands. The next is the 7-limbed prayer, which we recite only in English, and in the previous weeks, there's already been some explanation of the way in which this practice generates merit, purifies negative karma, and strengthens our aspiration for enlightenment. So I won't say much more about it. I prostrate my three doors with a mind of respect and offer all actually arranged and mentally emanated offerings. I reveal all the downfalls and negativities that I have ever collected and rejoice in the virtues of individuals and superiors. Please remain perfectly abiding until samsara is no longer seen. I request you to turn the vast and profound wheels of Dharma. I dedicate the virtues of myself and others to the great enlightenment. And the next prayer is the prayer of the lineage of gurus, which we will recite in both Tibetan and English. So really this takes us on from the reflection of the kindness of Guru Shakyamuni Buddha as the founder of the teachings that provide guidance to us in our lives and in this era. The only way that because Guru Shakyamuni Buddha isn't here present with us today, because we didn't have the karma to be reborn in his era, the only way that we have access to these teachings is through the lineage of teachers from the time of Guru Shakyamuni Buddha down until now, including our own spiritual teacher. So again, this is a wonderful reflection, not only on the kindness of other living beings, but also on dependent arising, on the fact that 2,600 years later, the positive influence, the positive intent of Guru Shakyamuni Buddha is still being experienced by us through the agency of the lineage of kind teachers who have taught over those 2,600 years. The other inspiring thing about reflecting on the lineage is that each of those teachers, like us, were people who were inspired by the Buddha's teachings and put them into practice into their own lives and achieved realizations as a result. So reflecting on this prayer reminds us that we ourselves are part of this lineage, and that by practicing, there's no reason we have the identical potential to achieve the realizations that these great teachers of the past have, with sincerity, persistence, energy, and positive motivation. So again, it's good to be familiar with this prayer, to reflect on each of the teachers, to learn something about them, and that way we feel a stronger connection both with Guru Shakyamuni Buddha, but also with the various lineage teachers and their traditions. Punso gele jeve trompeco, daye drove lewa confesso, malo sheja jishin sepetu, shache tso de la gocha, dame tampa de se chicho, Gelve sepa conci cono, Rame scendo trope namro, me pam jambe yang la shalsa, shinto papa kava jave, jishin gongpa chase zangli, Lodro tome chene sasun, yang sudrape jabla dak chatsa, shinta jembo nilele jupe, samutawa jachen chupe, mano yang su sope ne dupe, Dampe sin mame zel, dojo kanji namji ne zope, jishin zigshin zivi dom sepe, jave damcho malu sin pai, lo sandra pe la shatsa,
Rabjang Sunra Pulatave Kelzang Tapa Jepeju Seve Jepe Take Jepai Salje Jenye Namla Gucha. Body born from a million magnificent, excellent virtues, speech fulfilling the hopes of infinite beings, a mind that sees all objective knowledge precisely, I bow my head to the chief among the Shakyas, supreme sons of the incomparable teacher, carrying the load of all the conqueror's deeds by their emanations appearing in countless realms. I prostrate to Maitreya and Manjushri. The mother of conquerors is difficult to fathom. The precise thought is in commentaries written by Jambudvipa's ornaments, Nagarjuna and Asanga. I prostrate at the feet of those most renowned in the three realms. From these two great chariots come the excellent lineages of the paths of profound view and vast deeds, their essential points gathered thoroughly and without fault, prostration to the lamp holding this treasury of instruction, giving explanation to compassion by seeing precisely and completely the essential points of all paths of Sutra and Tantra, holder of the conqueror's entire holy Dharma, prostration to the glorious Dosangdrakpa. I, seeing all the infinite teachings, supreme way of crossing for those entering the journey's liberation, moved by compassion to deeds skilled in method, prostrations to the spiritual masters who make everything clear. And the next prayer is the great treasury of excellence. And this is truly a remarkable prayer, and one that it's enormously useful to memorize, because if we memorize the great treasury of excellence, then we have the whole path to enlightenment in our pocket. By being familiar with the verses of the great treasury of excellence, by reflecting on them, we're able to reflect, meditate on the path to enlightenment at any time. It's a truly wonderful prayer. Again, as with any of them, it's useful if we're familiar with it and if we take care to mindfully reflect on the meaning. So if we're able to mindfully maintain our mindfulness throughout the recitation of the prayer, then we've familiarized our mind with the whole of the path to enlightenment, from Guru Yoga through to the realizations of the Vajrayana. So really, really good to be familiar with it. A bit later in the year, we might spend a session where we simply go through this prayer, because it's a wonderful and powerful overview of the path to enlightenment. So we'll recite this prayer only in English, starting on page 27. The kind master is the basis of all qualities, and proper reliance is the root of the path. By seeing this excellence and through much striving, bestow blessings to be devoted with great respect. This gentle support of freedom, obtained this one time, is most difficult to achieve. Knowing its great value gives rise to a mind seizing its essence constantly day and night. Bestow blessings to generate this continuum unceasingly. It is like a bubble in water, this constantly moving body and life. Thus remember the swift collapse of death. Beyond death, like body and shadow, white and black karmic results follow after. By gaining firm certainty in this, the mass of faults, subtle and very subtle, are abandoned, and the accomplishment of all virtuous collections completed. Bestow blessings to ever retain conscientiousness. The qualities of samsara are unfit to be trusted. The door to all suffering. Do not be content with these enjoyments. By knowing its defects, bestow blessings to develop a great aspiration for the bliss of liberation. By that pure thought, great conscientiousness is drawn forth, and mindfulness and awareness of the individual liberation, the root of the teachings. Bestow blessings to make this the essential practice. Just as I myself have fallen into samsara's ocean, all living beings as mother are also like that. by seeing the responsibility for the liberation of beings, bestow blessings to be trained in supreme bodhichitta. However, by merely generating the mind, if not acquainted with the three aspects of ethics, enlightenment will not be attained. By seeing this excellence, bestow blessings to train with strong effort in the vows of conqueror sons, pacifying distraction toward perverse objects by way of proper analysis of the perfect meaning. Bestow blessings to swiftly and continuously generate the path related to the union of calm abiding and special insight. Thus, becoming a vessel trained in the common paths, enter the Vajrayana, supreme evolution of all vehicles. Bestow blessings to engage the easy path itself, that sacred way of crossing for fortunate beings. The base of practice for the two aspects of attainment is when guarding the pure vows of commitment is found to be genuine and certain. Bestow blessings to protect them even at risk of life. Then, by understanding properly the important points, which are the essence of the two stages of the Tantra classes, bestow blessings to practice according to these holy teachings with continuous effort in the supreme four-session yoga. Like that, may the spiritual friend revealing the gentle path and the friends of proper practice stand firm. Bestow blessings to quickly pacify the masses of outer and inner hindrances. In all rebirths, may I never be parted from perfect gurus and the enjoyment of the glorious Dharma. By utterly completing all qualities, paths and grounds, may I quickly achieve the state of Vajradhara. Well, I promise not to take quite so long the prayers every week, but I thought it was worth going through them in a bit of detail for this midterm session. So I thought I'd start from where Anna and Pam have left off, firstly by doing a brief recap of the parts of the path to enlightenment that they've covered. A great way to do that, and one that Geshe used often, is to use the outline, which begins on page 909 of Geshe's text. So again, it's really useful to be familiar with the outline. It was something that Geshe often referred to. So whenever he began a new subject, he would explain where it fell within the outline, and he would explain the divisions of that subject. One of the things that really highlights is that the path to enlightenment isn't merely presenting academic information. It's not presenting us information merely because it's pleasant or soothing or comforting or interesting. The path to enlightenment is a manual. It's like a map that gets us from where we are now to the ultimate destination of enlightenment. And what the outline highlights is the detailed instructions that we have from getting where we are to getting to that ultimate destination of enlightenment. So from that point of view, it's really useful to be familiar with it. So in the best case scenario, we'd be able, following the tradition of monks and nuns who study, to actually memorise the entire outline. And so it's a bit like the Great Treasure of Excellence prayer, except on steroids. So if we actually had the full details of the whole of the path of enlightenment at our disposal just like that, then that would be enormously powerful for our practice. But even if we can't do that, it's good to be familiar in a general sense with the outline. And also if we're studying particular subjects at a given time, to understand the outline for that particular subject. So, for example, if we're looking at the benefits of bodhicitta and we want to meditate on the benefits of bodhicitta, then if we have those 22 benefits memorized, well then it's much easier to be able to just do the meditation and reflect on them more deeply. So There are four main divisions according to this outline in the Path to Enlightenment, and Anna and Pam have made wonderful progress because we've already covered the first three and are into the four. So that's the good news. The bad news is that, well, it's not bad news, but that accounts for approximately maybe 1/5 of the entire text so far. So there's so most of the material in the Path to Enlightenment is in the fourth division. But we'll just recap briefly the first three. So the first of the four major divisions of Path to Enlightenment is entitled Showing the Greatness of the Composer, for the sake of showing that these Dharma teachings have a pure respectable origin. And in this preliminary section of the Path to Enlightenment, Geshe Loden presents the background of the great teachers and yogis who began this tradition. That is Atisha, who composed the lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, and Jetsun Tsongkhapa, who composed the three great Lam Rims, which have inspired Geshe Loden's three Lam Rim texts. So, as I mentioned before, we weren't around at the time of Shakyamuni Buddha, and it's said maybe poetically that Shakyamuni Buddha taught 84,000 different dharmas. And for us, 2,600 years later, if we were simply to be presented with those 84,000 different teachings and different methods, it would be hard to know where to start. But the great benefit of the Path to Enlightenment, the teachings that Atisha and Jetsun Tsongkhapa have given us, is that all of those 84,000 teachings and methods are synthesized into a gradual structure that we can put into practice, first beginning with the more elementary subjects, and as we gain an understanding of those, using those as the basis for understanding and meditating on the more complex subjects, up to finally the most subtle subject, the wisdom perceiving emptiness. So again, it's useful to reflect on the fact that this tradition doesn't come from nowhere. It came from human beings just like us, who spent their lives, their intelligence, their good motivation in taking the Buddha's teachings and presenting them in a form that we, along with countless other millions of human beings, practice today and have been practicing for generations since. So it's good to reflect on that. The second section, which follows closely from the first, is reflecting on the special qualities of these teachings themselves that have been given to us by the tradition founded by Atisha and Jetsun Tsongkhapa. And again, I won't go through them in detail because Anna has already covered them, but again, it emphasises the fact that these teachings are presented in a way that's most easy for us to practice. Not simply that we're gaining information, not simply that we're becoming experts in Buddhism, but that we're finding out the way that we can apply them and the way that we can understand the relationship between different parts of the teaching. So that teachings that might, if we don't delve enough, seem contradictory, that if we understand them fully, we can see that in fact they're not, that they reinforce each other. So again, if the first part, these first preliminary subjects are really in a way flagging to us that what we're about to embark on, what we're about to read about, what we're about to study isn't an ordinary text. It comes from an extraordinary source and it has an extraordinary purpose. And it's really useful if we can, it empowers our practice if we can maintain a mindfulness of that. So there are so many activities that we can do. There are so many things that we can learn about, especially in this online age. So, for example, we could decide that we'd like to learn picture framing, and we could find a really good text on picture framing written by the top expert in the field, and if we read that and apply it assiduously, well then we might achieve the result of being a really good picture framer ourselves. Or we might really like the thought of learning another language. We might like to be able to speak Italian fluently. So we look for the teachers who are the most effective, the most renowned teachers of Italian. We look for the best texts, we apply those, and again, if we put in effort, then we might achieve the result of becoming a really good Italian speaker. Path to enlightenment is entirely different because the result that it's looking for, unlike any other activity that we might be engaged in, is the complete realisation of our potential. The path to enlightenment aims to enable us to realise our own innate potential for complete, unlimited great love, for complete, unlimited great compassion, unlimited generosity, unlimited ethics, unlimited wisdom, and so forth. Nothing else that we can learn, nothing else that we can study, nothing else that we can spend time on can bring that result. And so these preliminary teachings are really directing us to that, to reminding us that we shouldn't just approach it like any other activity that we might be engaged in or interested in, like picture framing or learning Italian or cooking or so forth, that it's something entirely different, that it's an order beyond any other activity that we might be engaging in. The benefits of it extend way beyond anything that we could possibly conceive of. So by reflecting on and understanding these preliminary subjects, again, it builds our inspiration. It means that we approach the text in a way that helps us to gain the most benefit from it in our lives, the most power and inspiration in our lives. So very useful to be familiar with that and for us to reflect on that. The third section, the way to listen to and teach the Dharma, which has the two sets of excellent qualities. So again, wonderful guidance on the benefits of listening to the Dharma, how we go about listening to the Dharma, what the faults that we need to look out for in listening and the way to remedy those. Again, I won't go through all of the detail, but all of these preliminary practices we should approach not simply as if they're administrative things that we need to get through until we get to the real subject. These are, as much as anything else, the real subject. These are also training our mind, developing our good qualities. The fourth stage, which we've the fourth of the four, which Pam has made us start on during the sections that she's taken at the stages of leading the disciple to the actual instruction. So this is where we get through the substance of the teachings of the path to enlightenment. Again, this has a couple of high-level divisions. So the first thing we do is, on being led through the actual instruction, is to learn about the practice of Guru Yoga. And that, in the Path to Enlightenment outline, firstly, there's an explanation of how we practice Guru Yoga properly, what it means, what it doesn't mean, how we go about finding a spiritual teacher, how we go about checking that spiritual teacher, and once we do so and have complete and genuine conviction in the qualities of that teacher, and not before, once we do, how we're able to use our relationship with that teacher for the most benefit for our practice. And then secondly, that section on the practice of Guru Yoga explains, on how to rely on a guru, explains how to go about meditation practice. So that's the first. So relying on the guru is the first of the two stages of leading the disciple through the actual instruction. The second is, and this is in the outline on page 914, is after relying on the guru, the stages for training the disciple's mind. So we've engaged in the preliminary subjects, we've understood Guru Yoga, We have a guru on whom we can rely. What do we do next? Again, under this, there are two divisions under this main heading of the stages for training the mind. Only two. The first is persuading oneself to take the essence of leisure and fortune, or persuading oneself to take the essence of the states of leisure. I beg your pardon. So this is again on the outline on page 914. So again, Pam has gone through this subject in detail in previous weeks, but what this is alerting us to is the fact that we need to be alive to the extraordinary opportunity that we have right now to realise our potential, to go beyond our current limitations and to achieve the complete perfection of enlightenment. Understanding that is an opportunity that's dependent, it's supported by a whole lot of causes and conditions. That by no means every living being has those causes and conditions. In fact, if we look around us, we can see that the vast majority of living beings don't have those causes and conditions. By recognising that, again, it gives us the energy to extract the most value out of our practice of the Mahayana Dharma. So, after relying on the Guru, the first of the two stages is persuading oneself to take the essence of the states of leisure, and then the next thing we do after we have understood leisure and fortune is that we actually take the essence of our state of leisure and fortune. So that's the heading on the middle of page 915 of the outline, the means for taking the essence of leisure and fortune. And effectively, the way that we take advantage of it, what we do with this life of leisure and fortune in order to gain the most benefit, to move ourselves closer towards a state of enlightenment, is to engage in the practice of the three scopes. And that's indicated, so we can see under the heading, the means for taking the essence of leisure and fortune, there are two subheadings. The first is called acquiring conviction regarding the general aspects of the path, and the second is the actual way of taking the essence of leisure and fortune, and the practice of the three scopes comes under that second. So practicing the small scope, the medium scope, and the great scope is the actual way that we take advantage of the current gift we have of the states of leisure and fortune. Geshe's explanation of what the three scopes are, what they mean and how they work, is contained in the section under the heading on page 915, acquiring conviction regarding the general aspects of the path. So Geshe first explains what the three scopes are, small scope, medium scope and great scope, and then the next division of that is to then to go into an explanation of each of the small scope, medium scope and great scope. So we'll look a little bit at those three scopes before we actually start talking about the small scope teachings. So Geshe's explanation of the three scopes starts on page 218 of the Path to Enlightenment, and he introduces it by saying that all of the Buddha's teachings are included in the path of three types of beings. It is beings of small, medium and great scope. So then Geshe explains that all of the Buddha's teachings are given solely for the benefit of others, and whether they fall within any of these three scopes, that their objective is to enable living beings to attain what's referred to as higher status or definite goodness. Higher status generally refers to a higher rebirth, and definite goodness refers to either the state of nirvana, liberation, which is the focus of the medium scope, or the state of enlightenment, which is the objective of the great scope teachings. So when talking about the practice of small scope, which is what we've begun on at the moment, Geshe explains that there's a difference between small scope beings and small scope teachings. So within beings of the small scope, firstly, there are those whose objective is to achieve greater happiness or good conditions in this life. The second type of small scope being is those whose main focus is on achieving greater happiness or good conditions in future lives. The teachings of the small scope, though, are only directed at beings of the second type. So teachings that merely show us how to improve how to improve our conditions, how to improve our happiness in this life, don't form part of the small scope teachings. Or to put it another way, they're not part of the Buddhist teaching. So, for example, we could engage in practices of mindfulness, of relaxation, of study, and we could do that with a view to gaining more calmness in this life, better mental health, better physical health, better emotional health, and those practices could be very effective in achieving that objective, but they don't form part of the Buddha Dharma. We only begin practicing the path of small scope from a Buddhist perspective at the point that we enter the small scope, that we use the teachings of a small scope with the objective of at least achieving a higher rebirth, of achieving benefits after this life has ended. Geshe explains why, at 219, why the Lam Rim is structured according to these three levels or three scopes. So the first is that practicing this way enables us to grow progressively. So we start off with an objective that might seem more achievable than achieving the complete perfection, the complete elimination of negativities of nirvana or the complete perfection of enlightenment. So we're able to begin with something that's closer to where we are at the moment. Practices of the small scope, and make no mistake, if we have realised the small scope, we're an absolutely extraordinary person. So supposing we're able to do that, we're able to achieve the perfect realisation of the practice of the small scope, still there is no reason to be proud, because there's something even more extraordinary, something more something with an even broader scope that we can perfect. And also this method of presentation of the three scopes is suitable for the fact that we all have different levels of intelligence and different levels of capability. So how would we know that we've achieved the small scope? So Geshe explained, and I'll jump a little bit ahead, but we'll come back. So in explaining the small scope, Geshe first presents the practices, but then also at the very end explains the criterion of having gained the small scope. So how would we actually know when we've achieved the realisation of this first stage? We've attained the realisation of the small scope. What is important to us, what's implicit in everything we do, is gaining some sort of temporary benefit which doesn't go beyond this life. So we rarely think about about our future lives. We rarely think about the fact that our actions in this life could even have consequences in our future lives, we're pretty much focused simply on what's going to happen in this life and how we can set things up so that we can extract the most happiness we can. At the point where genuinely, from our heart, no faking it, at the point where the needs of our future life, the happiness of our future life, our success in our future life is more important come in this life, that's the point at which we actually have the realisation of the practice of the small scope. So we can see why that realisation isn't something minor, it isn't something that should be denigrated because it's only the realisation of the small scope. If we're able to do that, then clearly we would be an extraordinary person. If we think about it, so if we really gave precedence to the events in our future life, we would have a much healthier perspective on what was happening to us in this life. We wouldn't get nearly as worried about things in this life. We wouldn't get nearly as attached to things in this life. We wouldn't get nearly as upset about what might happen to us in this life because we'd have that longer focus. So just as in this life, we're at our best when we're focusing on our long-term future and not just the immediate thing in front of us, that's the way that we achieve the most value in our life. So if we have this longer-term perspective that we get from the practice of the small scope, our life is much more, has a much broader perspective, much more powerful perspective, and a much more that this marvellous opportunity that we have now, moment by moment, is diminishing, is escaping from us. Therefore, we must practice Dharma. We must practice. We must be aware of karma and practice karma properly. Geshe also talks about this in Path of Enlightenment at page 219, where he talks about the fact that all of the higher realizations of the Path of Enlightenment depend on the practice of the small scope. So we might want to go into the direction of enlightenment. We might be captivated by the thing that we'd really like to spend our energies on. But Geshe is saying here that unless we have the foundation of the practices of the small and medium scope, then we're not going to have enough energy. We're not going to really have the deep and intimate understanding of suffering and the nature of cyclic existence that enables us to develop great compassion and great love, which are the foundation of bodhicitta. And if we don't develop bodhicitta, then we can't attain enlightenment. Then Geshe explains it the other way around. So on page 221, he says, during the small scope meditations on impermanence, the lower realms, refuge and karma proceed to the higher practices of the Mahayana and attain enlightenment, including generation and completion stages of highest yoga tantra. So all of these are dependent on us being familiar with these practices of the small scope. So the small scope itself, there's a sub-outline which begins on page 223. The main value of that is that it gives us the opportunity to take control and to determine our future. Most living beings have limited ability to control the future experience, even in this life, let alone to create where there are no more days, where we've reached our last day. If we remember that, if death and impermanence, that this opportunity that we have is finite, then we are much more motivated to seize it, to make the most of it, to set our priorities in a more productive way. if we don't remember death, if we don't remember that we aren't going to be here forever, if we don't remember that this opportunity to practice will end, then we are effectively in a fantasy land, because we all know that in fact we are going to die. So if we're proceeding on the assumption, so if we never reflect on the fact that in fact this opportunity, at no point do we get more life, every day we have less life than we did the day before. And also that we have less time than we think, because we spend so much of our life sleeping, we spend so much of our time in the mundane activities that we need to do in order to sustain ourselves, and so our actual opportunity to develop our mind and our quality limited than we think. Secondly, at the time of death, notice. We don't know whether we're going to be here at the end of today. We don't know whether we're going to be here at the end of this week. When will this opportunity to practice Dharma, to develop our good qualities end? We have no way of knowing. We check up ourselves. We have no way of knowing when our opportunity to practice Dharma is going to end. What we do know is that there are so many things, so many factors, so many circumstances that lead to the death of living beings, and that any one of those could happen to us at any moment. And also that our bodies are relatively fragile. It doesn't take much to go wrong in order for our opportunity to practice to come to an end. What's going to help us at the time of death? What is going to be useful when we're in the last few minutes of our life? Our friends, our family, no matter how affectionate they are, feel towards us, this opportunity that we have is going to an end. When we die, the only thing that will benefit us is the positive minds that we've cultivated and developed attention to gather inwards. Also relinquishing memories of the past, plans or speculation about the future. If we find that our attention is wandering, then gently replace our attention. Allowing it simply to settle on our breathing. Quietly observing the breath as it rises and falls. Feel with each out breath. We're exhaling all stress, worry, negativity, illness. Which as it leaves our body dissolves into empty space. And with each in-breath, we draw in good health, great love, great compassion, all positive minds. All realizations of the path to enlightenment. Okay, so we'll conclude the short meditation. We'll do the final prayers. To the final prayer of the graduated path in English. By the two collections, vast as space, amassed with effort for a long time, may I become a chief of conquerors, a guide for all beings whose mind's eye is blinded by ignorance. Also in all lives, while not yet come to that, may Manjushri favour me with his compassion, finding the supreme path, complete with all stages of the teachings. May I please the conquerors by practising well. By my precise understanding of the essential points of the path, with skillful means drawn along by strong compassion, and by dispelling the mental darkness of beings, may I uphold the conqueror's teaching for a long time. Where the supreme precious teaching has not spread, also where it has spread but become degenerate, with a mind deeply moved by great compassion, may I make clear this treasure of benefit and bliss. The stages of the path, excellently established by the marvellous deeds of the conquerors and their sons, give glory to the minds of those aspiring for liberation. May the conqueror's deeds be long preserved. May all humans and non-humans remove the obstructions and establish conditions favourable to cultivating the excellent path, never be parted for all of their lifetimes from the purest of paths which the Buddhists have praised. When someone makes effort to practice properly the 10 points of conduct of the Supreme Vehicle, may he always be assisted by the mighty protectors, and may oceans of good fortune spread out, reaching all. And then the general dedication prayers on page 34. Gewandi Cheboko Sonam Yeshe Sozomshi Sonam Yeshe Le Gamba Ganye Tobasho. By this virtue may all beings complete the collections of wisdom and merit, and attain the two holy bodies arisen from wisdom and merit. Jangyo Sen Shogrim Boche Mache Banam Che Jo Che Che Ban Nyamba Me Abaye Gone Gondo Belashu. May the precious superior mind of enlightenment be generated in those who have not yet generated it, and not decrease in those who have developed it, but increase continuously. Thank you, everybody. I didn't leave any time for questions, but in future weeks I will. So if anybody has any, then either online or in person, then they're free to have a go. Anyway, thank you very much. See you.